over the past few days. I say few days, it's more the past week. Um, Talking about basically the top 10 albums, not necessarily top 10, but the 10 albums that you turn to the most when you want to listen to something, and they're basically like the old reliable, something that you can just throw on wherever and whenever. And so I wanted to chime in on that because, I don't know, just seeing everybody else is doing it really. Simple as. Talk about some honourable mentions first because there are quite a few albums that I could easily put in here that I don't own yet. And I wanted the main 10 to be ones that I actually have in my collection, but I still wanted some of these other ones that I don't own yet to be at least get their mention. So the 5 that I've chosen, in no particular order: The Blues and the Abstract Truth by Oliver Nelson. It's a jazz album from 1961. It's probably my second favourite jazz album. I just find it really easy to put on whenever I'm going to read something, or whenever it's night time, I suppose, and I want to listen to music. I find jazz is really good at night. Same with any ambient albums. Paramore, This Is Why. This is the only album that I'll be talking about that came from this year. I'll talk about it more in detail, I think, when I actually get my own physical copy of it. But I've listened to it so much since the start of this year when it was released. And yeah, it's incredible. I've never really been much of a Paramore fan, but I think this album has changed me. Next is Red House Painters, Roller Coaster, or Red House Painters 1, as I think it's also named. This one's a really slow album. It's open, honest, and depressing, but I kind of like my music like that sometimes. And it really showcases how slow some songs can go, and it's still being very listenable and accessible, because of they're very easy on the ear, I should say, which is something that I really like about the songs. Some of them were a bit long. There's one towards the end called Mother. I think it's like 13 minutes long. That's a bit on the long side, but generally the album is top notch. Stranger is another one. And I mean, trying to choose, if you were asked to choose like 3 songs that you like from this album, it's so hard, like your top 3 songs. Because you've got the title track, obviously, The Stranger, Only the Good Die Young, Anthony's Song, Vienna, She's Always a Woman. There's so many hits from this album, it's it's ridiculous. Be as well also have an album, Hellfire, that I've been listening to a lot recently. This one was from last year. It's probably the most chaotic album that I'll be talking about on this list. It's a lot to take in on first listen, even though it's only 36 minutes, but somehow in all of the dynamics that are going on, because it really does change up all the time. Like, you never know what to expect. It throws all sorts of curveballs at you. It makes it really interesting to listen to. And yeah, again, that's another one of the ones that I want to get into my collection. It definitely rewards you on repeated listens. I mean, there are parts of some songs that I still don't even know the lyrics to because of how fast the singer sings them, or speaks them, I suppose. Some parts are sort of spoken word, it's a bit strange. but I think it's a modern masterpiece. Even though it only came out last year, I'd say it's a 10. That we're about to go into here is probably, I mean, they're like my own sort of personal greatest hits in terms of albums. And we're going to start off with Slow Dive here. Now, I actually haven't opened this CD yet. I'm waiting to give this album here a listen. Expect from it, but I've enjoyed every other album by Slow Dive, even the things that the singles that they're putting out at the moment, like Kisses. I've even enjoyed those, and a lot of people seem to be a bit indifferent on them. I don't think they're incredible or anything, but I'm still excited to see what the new album's going to be like when it comes out in September. But what we're actually talking about here is really Souvlaki. This is, I mean, Souvlaki's like one of the shoegaze greats, I think. I know a lot of people like to turn to Loveless or Ride, but for me, Souvlaki wins every single day of the week. I'm going to try and keep it to like talking about 3 songs per album here because I could really go on all day probably. But I think Alison is a phenomenal opener. I think it was the only song that I knew before I actually listened to the album. Souvlaki Space Station is like this post-rock adventure. Maybe Dagger, which is, I mean, I'm always partial to an acoustic track, and Dagger is like the perfect closer for this album. It's very melancholic. It's very depressive. I mean, it is essentially a breakup album between Neil and Rachel here, but it's so easy to throw on for me. It's one of the easiest albums to just turn to and just into emotionally, because it's sad, but it's liberating in a way, and that's a good combo to get. And already I know that I'm talking way too much about these, so let's move on. Next up, Radiohead. I don't really know if there's much I can say about Radiohead that hasn't been said already about someone on the internet, so we'll try and keep this short and sweet. Um, by Radiohead. It's probably very, very close right enough behind Kid A. OK Computer used to be my favourite, but I think it sort of slipped down in my estimation over the past little while. Not that I think it's a bad album. It's just I find Kid A lot easier to listen to, and Rainbows is also of that similar ilk. Picking 3 songs from this album. Weird Fishes, probably Reckoner. Body Snatchers. It's really, really difficult for this album because I feel like on any given day I could pick 15 Step or Nude, or Jigsaw Falling Into Place, and if I'm in a pretty bad place, probably Videotape as well. I'm a big fan of Radiohead. Even I would even go as far to say that I like The King of Limbs, which I know isn't massively popular with everyone. The King of Limbs has some of my favourite tracks on it, but it also has the only song by Radiohead that I don't like in Feral. But yeah, in Rainbows is very easy for me to put on. And in a similar nature to Souvlaki, just drift away into the colourful landscape that it sets for you. And as I mentioned earlier, I am partial to an acoustic track. In this case, it's an acoustic album, Pinkman. Again, not my favourite by Nick Drake, even though that would be the popular consensus. I mean, this is probably one of the most critically acclaimed albums, acoustic albums, I should say, of all time now. Pinkman being the catalyst for that, I think. I believe it was like a Volkswagen advertisement or something it was put on, and then that sort of put him back on the map after he died. But again, to choose 3 songs from this, for me, that's quite difficult. Place to Be, Pinkman, obviously. I'm a really big fan of Things Behind the Sun and From the Morning, though. Those two are really been enjoying recently, as well as Road, because they're like little. They are just like little poems, you know. Some of them don't even really have any chorus or anything. It's Nick Drake being open, and I just love his overall style. It's very intimate. It's very personable, and there's a dog on the cover, so yeah. Although I prefer Five Leaves Left to this, I've definitely grown to really appreciate this recently. Plus, there's the added aspect of the fact that this is only like less than a half an hour long, so it's very easy to throw on. One I've been listening to a lot recently is The Queen is Dead, because well, I love the Smiths. Anybody who knows me knows I love the Smiths. About this album. I mean, I was one of the ones that listened to it when the Queen died. Not really out of any malice, it was more because, I don't know, it just seemed like the meme thing to do. And any excuse to throw this album on for me is a good one. It's also probably my favourite album of any that is on this list here, I guess. Probably. I'd say this is probably my second favourite album ever behind one other, but we'll get into that another time. I mean, it gets harder and harder. Really enjoying Cemetery Gates. Big Mouth Strikes Again. The Side has been one of my favourite. It's been one of my favourite Smith songs basically since the beginning, along with like Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. That was the first song I ever heard by them, and I was hooked instantly. But yeah, even things like Some Girls Are Bigger Than Others, the guitar parts on this are perfection. Huge fan of the Smiths. I can't believe it took me so long to even get into them, actually. I wish I got into them sooner. From my childhood, I've grown up with Parachutes, really. Coldplay are a strange one because I don't like the modern output of Coldplay, and I have tried to give them a chance. I listened to Everyday Life, which came out in 2019. It's not really me, that album. It's a very different style, though. I guess that would be the obvious reason. Because this is, I mean, a lot of these albums here, to be honest, you could probably just tie down to alternative rock in some form. This is very influenced by Radiohead, though, as well as probably like early U2. Is an excellent album. I love the music video for Shivered as well, because you can see, I mean, you can see how young they are there. They all actually still have hair, which isn't the case anymore for some of them. But yeah, track listing, even though Yellow is probably the big hit that everybody knows, the 3 I would choose are probably Shiver, Sparks, and Everything's Not Lost. Those are the 3 that to turn to. It's, I think it's a relatively uplifting album, at least towards the end. I think, in my opinion, it's quite a liberating listen, um, especially compared to the next album, which I would say is a lot more depressive. Although this does have uh, some sad lyrics. I mean, Shiver would be one of those songs. In Trouble, We Never Change, and Everything's Not Lost really brings it back. And there's also the hidden track, uh, Life is for Living, which really wraps it up very nicely towards the end. The Head in the Door. This is one of my favourites from The Cure. It's not my absolute favourite, but this is the easiest to listen to in my opinion. I think for anybody getting into The Cure, this would be the album I would point them to, because it's more poppy in nature. And when I went to see The Cure back in December, I noticed that everybody seems to love what's it called? Close to Me. Just it's a really short album, which is the case for most albums I listen to. They tend to be about 35 to 45 minutes. Much easier for me to decide if I want to throw something on if it's shorter. I'm not a big fan of albums that go on forever. If it's over an hour, if it's like a double album, I am a lot more apprehensive about throwing them on. Whereas with this, similar to most of the albums that I've already talked about, it starts off with In Between Days with that drum beat, and then that's you set for the next 35 minutes, and you can get on with whatever you're doing. Now, of course, if you don't like the poppier nature of The Cure, there's always the darker side of The Cure with 17 Seconds, which I throw on quite a lot, even though it's nowhere near my favourite by The Cure. That's one that I throw on quite a lot as well as Faith. Faith is an excellent record. It's very it's got a very ambient side to it, and it's one of the things that The Cure does ever so well is they know how to let the music breathe. They don't force the song along with lyrics or anything. If they feel like they want to have like 2 minutes of just music, then they will. And I really appreciate that about it. Neil Young after the Gold Rush. So, after Neil Young took his music off of Spotify, I knew that I would have to start buying his albums and CD because I can't live without Neil Young's music. I just can't. And in a way, it's maybe a good thing that he took his music off of Spotify because I am mostly a digital listener. If I go out, though, this is typically the album that I go to, because I have it on my iTunes, and it's, if I'm indoors, I'm more likely to listen to something else. But again, just an incredibly pleasant sort of folk rock listen. Like the sort of the shorter tracks, like Cripple Creek Ferry and Till the Morning Comes, they're sort of like lullaby nursery rhyme type tracks, and easy to dismiss those just because they're quite short, but I actually really appreciate them where they come in, because when Till the Morning comes in, you're just off the back of Southern Man, which is quite an intense song. But it's one of the greater songs on the album as well. Personally, though, if I was to choose three, After the Gold Rush, the title track. I mean, I even learned that song on guitar. As well, and probably Tell Me Why. I think I wasn't sure if I was going to choose Tell Me Why, but I think it probably would be. Because I love I'm pretty sure it's in either E flat or drop D, that track, and it's a very nice sort of mellow introduction into the album, and it's fantastic. One of my favourites of all time. Neil Young's After the Gold Rush. Now, this is where we might be getting into controversial territory because, well, Morrissey is always a controversial figure. Among people, when it comes to talking about Morrissey, it tends to go into the whole, he's always in the spotlight for talking his mind, basically. I'm going to try and steer away from that as much as possible here. Because I really love this album, and I do appreciate Morrissey's early music, and this probably is my favourite album by him. It's just, out of what I've heard so far, this seems to be the rockiest. People call it like his glam rock album. If you were to compare it to the Smiths for a minute, because I would say that Viva Hate, his first record, is the closest to sounding like the Smiths. I mean, that album came out like less than a year after Strange Ways Here We Come, which was the Smiths' final record. Of sort of the rockier side of the Smiths, so songs like maybe London or Panic, but my favourite is probably Seasick Yet Still Docked. Songs though, like You're the One for Me, Fatty. I mean, I think that was one of the singles for this album, and I really wonder, because they do get a fatter woman to play the role of the girlfriend in the music video, and I really wonder what the hiring process for that album, for that video must have been like, because it's like, you interview someone and they're like, yeah, we're looking for someone fat. we want a fat chick and we want you to be that person. How do you feel about that? Because I'm pretty sure she even, her boyfriend in the video gets her flippers and she eats the flippers. I don't know, the whole thing's just a bit silly to me. But yeah, it's a fantastic album. Don't think it's typically most people's favourites, but I think it is for me. Garcia Guess No, I don't know how often I'm ever going to really be able to talk about this album, so about this. First of all, this gives me a lot of childhood memories along with the next album, because they've been with me for a long time. This one reminds me of my cousin, John, who introduced me to this. He never really introduced me to the album, but he introduced me to the band by showing me the song Daddy's Gone that's on this album. Daddy's Gone is what it was about his dad dying, but I think it was about his dad leaving and not coming back. It might have been about divorce, possibly. But my original interpretation was that his dad died when I first heard the song. Flowers and Football Tops is probably one of the go-to tracks. It's a really slow. I should probably mention this is like a sort of shoegaze, sort of indie rock album from like the late noughties. Because I realise that I'm just sort of talking about this random album that most people probably haven't heard. But Flowers and Football Tops has a really slow intro to it, and it's a song about sort of the murder of a 15-year-old boy and flowers and football tops is a reference to what people tend to do when someone has died, and they usually leave flowers and football tops at wherever the memorial would be, as well as the headstone. It's a very depressive album, this one, overall, I would say. I mean, look at some of these titles. It's Mon Cheating Heart That Makes Me Cry, Pullman on My Mind, Daddy's Gone, Stabbed, Sad Light. I have a memory of talking to my brother about this album, actually, and making the comment of, we were talking about how sad the album is and if it has any happy songs on it whatsoever, and I suggested Sad Light, the song that has sad in the title. Yep, that's the brain capacity of me. And finally, but definitely not least, this is probably my most listened to of all of these, actually, because I've known it the longest, is Boy by U2. Loads and loads of times. For a long time I believed that this was Larry Mullen as a kid, but I don't think it is. I think I heard recently that it's actually their son or something, like their neighbour's little brother, something like that. And the same kid is used on the War album. Now, why have I chosen this over War? Considering War is my favourite album. Well, War's my favourite U2 album, I should say. I'm definitely going to talk about my listing for the U2 albums from least favourite to favourite, because I have a lot to say on those. But again, similar to the rest of them, this is just like, it's just a very easy listen. This is like when they were in their post-punk era. And for some reason I just find it easier to throw on than War. War is a bit more in your face. This is a bit more held back, although they're still full of energy, don't get me wrong. I still think it's really easy to throw this one on, still to this day. That seems to be the recurring theme with all of these. It's just, I suppose that is what the goal of the albums are. 1980, when the world first got to hear the sound of the Edge, and it was before U2 really took over in the 80s, before the Unforgettable Fire era, and Live Aid, and the Joshua Tree, and going to America, and all that stuff happened. I've spent a lot of time with this album over the years. Into the Heart is one of my favourite tracks by them. Twilight, A Day Without Me, and Shadows and Tall Trees is another one of my favourites as well. Songs like Inside Out at this point, I've listened to it so many times since I was a kid. And growing up with a band does that to you, I suppose. Listen to this one the most out of all these though. And the closest to it being probably Parachutes, because I've known that for quite a long time as well. But yeah, I just realised that I've been talking for like a half an hour, and as usual, I have went way over my expected runtime. I was hoping to keep this to like 15 minutes. Clearly, I talk too much, so my suggestion for anybody listening would be play this in 2 times speed, probably. I hope you've enjoyed this list, though. Let me know if you have your own list in the comments below. I'm going to try and upload a bit more to this channel, because I keep taking these big, ridiculous sort of breaks. It's, even though my intention is to upload a lot more, my brain sort of takes over and it just goes, no, we'll procrastinate a bit more. Even though when I do record these, I tend to enjoy it. So, yeah, hopefully there will be more videos very soon, talking about all sorts of bands, all sorts of genres, all sorts of albums and songs and such. And I'll hopefully see everybody again on the channel very soon. Like and subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you all very soon.